We're back on Wooden Sticks, recording from the Aquarius Home Services studio. Want to thank all you for coming back to take a little listen today. We're going to talk a lot of college hockey on the show. Looking forward to a conversation with Bruce Ciskie, longtime play-by-play guy for the UMD Bulldogs. He's got a radio show up there. He's a sports manager and director of Midwest Communications. He's also done some moonlighting for The Athletic. Great credentials, great passion for the game. He knows college hockey as well as anybody out there. And so it's going to be really fun to talk to him. We're going to relive some championship memories. He's covered the Bulldogs through a couple of those, has a great relationship with their head coach, Scott Sandlin, who's one of the really good coaches in the game today and one of the real good guys in the game as well. So it'll be fun to connect with Bruce. Because of my travels with the Wild and covering the NHL the way I have to for my gig, I don't get a chance to watch and follow college hockey like I used to. In fact, when I really got going here, I think I started it was called Fox Sports North at the time. For all you youngsters that maybe don't know that, but back in 06, 07, when I got my first kick at the can on the Wild side of things, we were still covering a ton of high school and college hockey. So my schedule would kind of be split up those first handful of years. And I've really gone full-time Wild once I started traveling in that later part of that, maybe 08, 09 time frame. So I don't follow the college hockey like I used to. And to have a guy like Bruce Ciskie on my speed dial ready to go and catch me up and find out what's going on in that world. And, right after the World Juniors where the U.S. team got their back-to-back gold and so many great college hockey players on that roster, including Zeev Puyum, who's, I think, going to be a terrific addition for the Minnesota Wild here in the next season or two. It'll be fun to connect with Bruce. But let's talk about the Wild briefly before we get into that. As we record this midweek, the Wild are coming off another impressive win against the St. Louis Blues, and they're coming off another significant star player getting injured. We don't know what it is with Brock Faber as I sit here and record on a Wednesday afternoon. We just know that he left the game in the first period with an upper body injury, and we've gone back and tried to watch some of that first period action to figure out what it was. And there wasn't a lot to look at. So that's concerning, to say the least. Minnesota has found a way to continue to keep this train on the tracks somehow, some way. Kaprizov looks like he's going to at least miss 2 to 3 weeks here. And that happened right after the Christmas break. Remember that day we were leaving for Dallas, he wasn't on the airplane. And that was the first we had heard of anything. He had played in the game on the 23rd, right before that 3-day mandated break. We don't think it's serious from the conversations from Bill Guerin to John Hines to all the different folks around the arena on a daily basis, but we haven't seen him on the ice. And so that still means it's at least, 6, 8, 10 days away from maybe a return for number 97. We know that Jared Spurgeon had that significant lower body injury. He's out for at least another few weeks. And even though the Wild got Jake Middleton back, to lose Brock Faber for any period of time here is going to be a challenge. The Wild have put themselves in a great spot. We are halfway through the season. This team is on pace for 110 points, which is remarkable. The over-under in the sports book at the end of summer for total points gained by the Minnesota Wild was 83.5. So they are far exceeding those expectations. They were at best considered a bubble team to make the playoffs. I year in, year out, go by the Hockey News, and they have a big yearbook they put out in August that handicaps every division, every team. And they've got, a couple dozen experts. And I would say of the 24 writers they had established in this article, maybe 5 or 6 thought the Wild would even make the playoffs. And so they're playing with house money right now to an extent. They put themselves in a great position where they can maybe weather the storm here a little bit. Bottom line is, in the second half of the season, if you look at this pragmatically, if they go 21-20, which is, again, much, I think for this group, they'd be disappointed. Much lower win percentage than what we've seen so far. But if they just go 21-20, play 500 hockey the second half of the year, considering the injuries now that they're dealing with, that would give them almost 100 points, high 90s, which basically guarantees them a spot in the postseason. So if they go through a stretch here where they struggle, I don't think anyone's going to panic, nor should they. You hope that what they're dealing with now, and this is on the heels of losing Zuccarello and losing Eck and missing key players basically now for the last 6 weeks. If they can just get healthy after they have that big break in February for the Four Nations face-off, then they'll be just fine. It's been really fun to see this team elevate their play. It's been great to see the growth of some of their young players, specifically a guy like Marco Rossi. You're seeing signs now from some of the key moves that Bill Guerin has made, specifically with Yakov Trenyan, who, let's be honest, the first month of the year, I didn't see a lot there. But in the last 3 or 4 weeks, his game has really elevated. And I had a conversation with John Hines on this last road trip after the game in Washington, and he reminded us that, listen, I've coached this guy, and I know what playoff hockey looks like in this league. And he said, guys, just trust me. What you're seeing right now is just a taste of the impact this guy can make when the rink shrinks. His point was, when you get to playoff hockey and those whistles get swallowed and space gets confined, a player like Trenyan, specifically in key areas like the penalty kill, his value just immensely goes up. So I'm going to trust John Hines and Bill Guerin on this one. And I'm going to trust what I've seen here with the eye test the last couple of weeks, because he has been a needle mover. He and Foligno have found something with Freddie Gaudreau in the middle, and that line doesn't need to score. That line needs to go out there and play physical hockey and bang bodies and defend well, be on the penalty kill that looks like it's ascending, and make their contributions that way. The Wild are going to have two lines that can score goals. Remember, when Kaprizov gets back and they're back to full health, that top six with the development now of Rossi looks pretty damn good. They're going to have some hard choices to make and how that thing lays out. But this is a very, very good hockey team. And I will be very surprised if this team doesn't make a run at the division title and then doesn't make a run once they get to the playoffs. I really like what I'm seeing right now. And we'll see how it all plays out. We got half a season to go, so we're not going to get ahead of anybody there. But the world we live in right now, even with the injuries, is pretty good. And I think we're set for a real fun next few months if you're a big-time Wild fan and watch that team on a regular basis. And as I mentioned, college hockey gets pretty fun right now too. We just had the holiday break. The kids not only get a break from class, but get a break from hockey. Some go to World Juniors. But when you get back to the middle of January and look at that college hockey landscape, we've got a pretty good body of work, but we've got another half of a season, if not more, for these teams to find their footing and to make their run. And in this market here in the Twin Cities, with Minnesota playing so well, it's going to be really cool to see how it all shakes out. UMD specifically has had a tough year. Bruce Ciskie is going to talk about that, going to talk about his relationship with Scott Sandlin, going to talk about maybe the most powerful conference in college hockey, the NCHC. And then we're going to dive into some fun topics too, just the history of UMD hockey and Mike Sertich, longtime coach that we lost back in 2024. Tremendous personality and great hockey mind himself. So a lot of fun today to be had, especially if you're a college hockey fan here on Wooden Sticks. Now, we got to talk about John Schweitz, my dear friend and one of our lead sponsors here on the show. When you think about the Freemasons, of course, you're going to think about those awesome pancake breakfast, the secret handshake, all the mystery involved. But let's get down to the nuts and bolts of it here in the Twin Cities. We're talking about the Masonic Cancer Center, Masonic Children's Hospital, and of course, the Masonic Home over in Bloomington. Just a couple examples of the important work that Freemasons support here in Minnesota. They're the largest fraternal organization in the world, and Masons have consistently, folks, answered that call when it comes to charitable needs. So happy that John Schweitz and Minnesota Masonic Charities have chosen our show for their platform. And of course, I got to thank Andrew Height. If you want to put your business, if you've got a friend or family member looking to elevate what they're doing, Andrew Height, the white dog, is how to get it done. All you got to do is email him, aheydt@talknorth.com, and you'll be amazed at what we can do for you thanks to the white dog. Right now, though, we got to get a quick word in from OnX Maps.
We've told you about OnX Hunt. Now let me tell you about OnX Fish. Ice fishing is here, and it's time to hit the frozen water with OnX Fish. The Fish app is the most comprehensive fishing tool for increasing your confidence on ice. Use OnX Fish to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potentials. OnX Fish also shows you hot spots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
All right, welcome back to Wooden Sticks. As always, we are recording today from the Aquarius Home Services studio. Time to talk a little college hockey. One of the gurus for college hockey in my world is Bruce Ciskie, a longtime play-by-play guy for the UMD Bulldogs, and just a great hockey mind in general. Bruce, welcome to the show. Looking forward to our chat.
Thanks for having me, Gorg. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, too. And I think for all college hockey fans, the holiday season is great to be with family and friends, but you always get to that point where you're like, okay, I miss the weekend rivalry games. I miss the Friday, Saturday cadence of college hockey. They've got some tournaments and they've got some non-conference events in and out of town. But, we get back to January now. We turn the calendar, and through the holiday season, we can start to think about the second half of the college hockey season. And college hockey right now is in pretty good hands. I mean, I feel like right now the game is pretty good.
Oh, I'd say the product has never been better. There's a lot of people that we went through the realignment, which that was almost 15 years ago now that we went through that. But there were a lot of people that swore off college hockey at that point, and all that the product has done since then is get better. We've recruited a whole lot of really good players and high-end elite players that have moved on to the NHL, and it's so much fun night in and night out because there are so many good teams. And even the teams that are newer, we just watched Augustana without their head coach go into Colorado Springs last weekend and sweep Colorado College. That would have been unheard of for a second-year program to do something like that even 5 or 10 years ago. But quickly now we've seen teams become competitive in this sport, and how the bottom has come up, the top has come up. This sport's in great hands.
How has Augustana done this? I look at their record. I think they're 12-7-1. They're getting unbelievable wins, as you just mentioned. You referenced that. And this isn't supposed to happen. I've watched it a little closer on the St. Thomas side of things because it's my alma mater, and I'm friends with that coaching staff. And they had some success last year. I think they've regressed a little bit this year. But this is incredible what Augustana is doing.
Well, I mean, like anything else, it starts with you have to build structure from the goaltender out. As you know, no hockey team is going to be good without quality goaltending. And Josh Kotai's got a .944 save percentage in 17 starts. That is not an accident. This guy can play. And when you've got that backstopping you, you're not going to give up a lot. They don't give up a lot, which is good because they don't score a lot. This is not a high-flying team. But Garrett Raboin can coach. He's been with some really good programs at St. Cloud State as a player and a coach, at Minnesota as a coach. That was a fantastic hire from day one for Augustana. They brought in the right kind of guys in the portal. They're recruiting well. They've got a great facility. We knew they were going to be good, kind of like we knew St. Thomas was going to step up and be good. I think how quickly it's happened may have taken some people by surprise.
Now, I always think of Arizona State when I think of the new version of college hockey, and I can't imagine they're going to have a hard time recruiting to that climate, to Mullet Arena, right? I mean, you think about like a college opportunity for a high school kid if you're a good hockey player, and their team's good. They're in the mix right now for the NCAA tournament. That's got to be a huge advantage in recruiting.
Well, yeah. I mean, we just spent a weekend there in early December, and my son came with, and we spent a couple extra days and explored the area, went up into Sedona, and it's such a beautiful part of the country that I'd not ever been to before. And Tempe it's a great spot. They draw really good crowds. They've got a good building, and Greg Powers was their club coach, and to see what they've been able to do, with a guy that was a club coach, and now he's a Division I hockey coach, and this team is very, very good. And it's not just transfers. They've recruited some really good players. They've got Cullen Potter, who's going to be a draft eligible this summer, and every single game he plays, he's getting better. He scored a couple of goals against UMD the weekend that we were there. He's been a factor. for them in a lot of their games. He's centering a top two line for them. I think it was on their top line when we were down there in December. And so it's not just the guys that they've got a lot of guys, Ty and Dylan Jackson from Northeastern out of the portal. Artem Schlein has been at Northern Michigan and UConn. They've got him out of the portal. They're both very good players. And they picked up Cruz Lucius out of Wisconsin out of the portal last year. He's not played a game for them this year because of injury. He was the leading scorer for the Badgers last year. So, the best might still be yet to come for Arizona State if they can get Lucius back.
Your passion for college hockey is unmatched. I've known you for a long time, Bruce. And, you mentioned the portal. And this has come up a couple of times here on our show as we've done these podcasts with, different levels of hockey broadcasters and former players. I find the portal like it was a necessary evil during the pandemic. I completely understood that. And looking at college athletics, whether it's football or hockey, the two sports that I probably follow the closest, I'm having a hard time with it now. Is this something that's going to be here forever? Or at some point, are we going to get back to the way it was when you could pretty much count on a roster of players being, at least at the core, on the top end of the talent of these college hockey programs together for 2, 3, and sometimes 4 years?
Well, first thing, the portal's not going anywhere. We might see some adjustments that are made to how things work and when you can enter, how long you're eligible to be in it. But the days of having to sit out a year when you transfer are gone. They're not going to come back. The days of only being able to transfer once without a penalty of any kind are probably gone. The reality is, the portal exists because the NCAA lost a lawsuit. And it's basically settled law now that the portal is going to be a thing. I don't think you're going to see that change. What I don't like about it, I have no issue with a guy that decides, I made a decision at 16 years old, and I'm 20 now. I just played my freshman year, and this isn't for me. I want to try something else. I have no issue with that. What I don't like is this perception, this feeling, and we just had Alaska in here last weekend, and the Gophers saw them in the weekend after Thanksgiving, and they played them very tough, played us very tough too here. And all I can think about every time I see one of their players, they got a couple of really good players that are freshmen and sophomores, and all I can think about is they're going to be in the portal because someone is going to sink their teeth into these kids and say, I can give you NIL money, or I can give you a better opportunity to be seen, or you can have a better opportunity to go play for a team that's in a conference that has a more realistic path to the NCAA tournament where you can be seen on a bigger stage. All these things, these independents have going against them. It's not just Alaska. It's Anchorage, it's Stonehill, it's Lindenwood. They all battle the same thing. When you have good players, the challenges to keep them are multifold because you don't have the NIL money. And you really don't have a great path to the NCAA tournament. I know Alaska missed it by maybe a win or two a couple of years ago, but that's an outlier of a season for those programs. They're not going to be factors in the pairwise a lot more, very often, if at all. So for them, I hate it because they're almost inevitably going to run the risk of losing good players after their freshman and sophomore seasons because those kids are going to yearn the bigger stage.
As you look at college hockey this year specifically, is there one team that stands out? I mean, I've seen Boston College. I've seen Michigan State a few times. I've watched the Gophers a lot. I have not seen Providence. Denver, to me, is a team that almost always makes a run. Is there one team right now, as you look at it here in early January, Bruce, where you say, when we get down to the nitty-gritty and when it gets to be crunch time in the NCAAs, this is the team to beat?
I really like what Minnesota has. I think Bob has done a fantastic job of you've got some guys up front that play a little more free-flowing style, but they've got structure in their back end. Sam Renzel's a special player who's going to go places in the NHL, and it might happen coming this spring. We'll see how that all plays out, but I think they've got depth and they've got balance on their team. The kind of depth and balance they had when they got to the national championship with Faber and Lacombe and all them a couple of years ago and Matthew Nyes up front. I think they've got a very similar team that might actually play with a little bit more structure out of their defensive zone, and you have to have that when you get into the NCAAs, and you're playing teams like Providence and Quinnipiac and teams out of the NCHC that can play with that structure every single game, 60 minutes a night. And the Gophers don't see that all the time in the Big Ten, but they can play with that. And I think that makes them a really dangerous team. But I'm going to highlight somebody in our league that I really like right now, and that's Western Michigan. They don't get a lot of national hype, but Pat Ferschweiler's done a tremendous job with that program. And if there's one question I've had about Western Michigan, that, looking at their past teams that have made the NCAAs and have come close to the Frozen Four, it's can they play with that structure when it matters most? But right now what they have is they've got two quality goaltenders that are playing great hockey for them. They've got a fifth-year in Cameron Rowe, a transfer from Wisconsin, who's in, I think, his third year at Western Michigan. But they picked up Hampton Slukinski out of Warroad off the USHL title he won last year in Fargo. He decommitted from Northern Michigan, ended up at Western Michigan, and we saw him with the World Junior team here. Hampton Slukinski is a tremendous goaltender. Those two together have put up unbelievable numbers in the first half for Western Michigan, and I do think they're going to be a big-time factor come March.
13-4-1, seventh in the pairwise, playing a great league. I think the league that the Bulldogs and Western Michigan play in right now is the premier league in college hockey, and I think that hockey stands out. Like, it's all good. Like, I love college hockey. I love watching the kids compete. But, man, you are treated to some of the best college hockey night in, night out in that league.
The coaches in this league, the talent that we have in this league, the buildings that we have in this league, Western Michigan notwithstanding, are second to none. Even Western's building, it's older and all, but it's got character to it. It is the most unique atmosphere that we see in our sport, with the students right below the press box. It's the one place that I don't run a crowd mic when we go, because you can already hear enough. You don't need to hear it enhanced. But that's even that place is it's just not that high end building that we have here in Duluth that we see now in Colorado Springs. They did a great job with Ed Robeson Arena. If you've not been there yet, I know you've been to the old building, but the new building is really nice in Colorado Springs. We've got that all over our league. We've got great buildings, great coaches, and a lot of really, really good hockey players.
You do, and I want to ask you specifically about one, and that's Zeev Boyum. I know when I had a chance to visit with you on your radio show, we got into the World Juniors a little bit, and we've seen some great college hockey defensemen in the last decade make it to the NHL and make an impact. I think of Cale Makar and obviously Brock Faber here locally with the Wild. Where does Zeev fit in your eyes?
I was thinking about it actually last night, Tuesday night, the Blues game, watching that, and some of the struggles the Wild are having with defensive zone play in the second period. And they flipped the switch when they pulled the goaltender and put Fleury in. But I thought, boy, Zeev Boyum could really help this team. There's two things that stand out about his game. Number one, his footwork is second to none. I look at him like I look at a Mikey Anderson who played in Duluth and is now with the LA Kings and is one of their top defensemen. And he's on an 8-year deal and deserved every penny that they gave him, and probably a little more than what they gave him. I think he took a bit of a cut to get the deal that he got when he got it. But he's having a great year with the Kings, and they're having a wonderful season. He's a big part of their team. And I look at Williams' feet and his stick, and I compare defensively to Mikey Anderson. But the difference to me is Zeev Boyum has elite offensive instincts that, no offense to Mikey, he really doesn't have. He's not that kind of player. He's more of a defensive defenseman. Zeev Boyum is going to be a special player in the NHL. And the question I have is, when this season ends, whenever it ends for Denver, does he sign and immediately start playing for the Wild like Brock Faber did? Because if he does, he might never play a game in Des Moines.
Oh, that's exciting. And I think he's one of those kids too, as we've kind of tracked his career the last few years. He's a winner. Like, it is not an accident that these teams continue to win, and he's one of the leaders on these teams. And they talked about this after the gold medal game on the NHL Network, and they went through his resume. And I just don't think it's a coincidence. There are some players that have that it factor, Bruce, and I'm sure you've seen a bunch of them come through Duluth, where they make everybody better, not just on the ice with their obvious skills, but off the ice, the way they work, the way they train, the way they lead in that locker room matters. And he feels like that kind of kid.
And the other thing and we saw it, I think, during the World Juniors, I did not think the U.S. had a very good start to their pool play. Then they got punched in the mouth by Finland in the preliminary round and lost that game in overtime. And in the older guys, it wasn't just the captains, Ryan Leonard, and the guys that were wearing letters, but it's everybody. All those guys raised their level of play and brought up everybody around them. And Zeev Boyum is one of those guys that his presence, his desire, his will to win, it makes him better, yeah. but it makes everybody around him better. And I think having a guy like that, it's one thing to have elite talent. There's a lot of guys in this sport that have elite talent. But what he's been able to do in a short amount of time, the amount of winning that he's done, that tells me that there's a different aura with a guy like that. And I cannot wait to see what he does in the NHL with the Minnesota Wild. I could tell you, we were watching the draft, Gorgie, and as he's falling down the board, I thought he would go in the top 5. I thought he should go in the top 5. As he's falling down the board, I'm thinking, what's it going to take for the Wild to go get a pick that they need to get this guy? And I was so excited when they moved up with Philadelphia.
I was too. We were kind of watching it the same way, and I had watched the college hockey last year in the Frozen Four, and I'd seen this kid, and I knew he was a really good player, and I was kind of watching the draft that night, thinking how is this kid going to fall? And then as it got closer and closer, and they made that move, I was so excited, and then just to watch how he's handled that since then, and the personality he brings to the table, he just seems like one of those players that all of us that cover the game are going to love to be around, and he is a terrific talent. Let's focus in on Duluth, and then I want to get into your path and how you ended up where you are. But the Bulldogs, there's no room for error in the NCHC, and I have so much respect for Scott Sandlin. He's one of the absolute best coaches I've ever been around. I've covered him on the college scene. I've been at seminars with him. I've watched him speak to young people. This is a guy I have tremendous respect for. It doesn't feel like it's been a great year for Sandlin or the Bulldogs. What's your assessment here halfway through the year?
I think it's interesting because I think Dominic James said it after Saturday's game that this is a results-oriented business. I think we all understand that, right? When you bring in 12 newcomers, 11 freshmen, 2 years after having 10 freshmen on a team in this league, you're swimming upstream automatically. It's just how it is. And I think the first part of the year, there were some struggles. It did not help that Max Plant, who played on the World Junior team, has only played in 5 games for this team. He pointed out to me today, he's yet to win a game in college hockey. He played the opening game against Bemidji State. Bemidji won in overtime. Max left the game with an upper body injury that left him out of the lineup for about a month and a half. And he came back and played in the 4 games that UMD played before break, which they lost all 4 of those games to Western Michigan and Arizona State. So he is yet to win a game as a college hockey player, and he is dying to do so. He wants to very badly wants to make that happen. But these young guys are getting better every single game. I can't look at one of them and say that they've not made significant progress. Whether it's Max Plant, his brother Zam, Harper Bentz, Blake Betch, and guys like that up front. It's Adam Kleber, who was on the World Junior team in the back end. Ty Hansen was a captain last season in Sioux City and helped that team to the USHL playoffs. They've all gotten significantly better. They've made big-time progress. And we saw goaltending last weekend in the 3 games that UMD played from freshman Clayton Knapp out of Ohio that, frankly, they did not get in the first half of the season. Knapp gave them the chance to win all 3 games they played last week. And those are all good signs going forward. Obviously, being close and having chances to win games is not the same as winning them. But we continue to see these young guys progressing. They're growing together as a group. They seem to really enjoy being around each other. They've been a kind of a breath of fresh air in a lot of different ways for this program. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they're able to do in the second half of the season. And hopefully it's accumulate some points and make a run here in this league and make some noise that, if nothing else, puts themselves in a really good position to hit the ground running in October of 2025.
And still with Sandlin and some of the young talent you're talking about, and if the goaltending trend continues, you get into a tournament format at the end of the year in your conference, there's still a team that they're good enough. That's the beauty of that league is there are no easy outs, and the teams that maybe have had a rough regular season in that scenario can make a run. And with a guy like Sandlin, you never know, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the 3 national championship banners that I'm looking at to my right in this building did not come here by accident. And, this team is starting to show that they can play the way that they have to play to win the way those teams won. And as these games are so often won on the margins. They've just got to find ways to get those good feelings for themselves. We saw it last Tuesday in Bemidji, 2-2 game in the third period. And they dominated that third period and won the game 4-2. But now they've got to continue to do that more often and understand that there's a certain way you have to close things out when you're in a conference like this. You just can't give up a lot of room to these teams, because if you do, they're going to take advantage of it.
So let's get back to where it all started for Bruce Ciskie. I want to hear about your journey. Let's take me back to when you were a little kid. Is this something in your mind as a youngster you said, man, it'd be really cool when I'm an adult to get paid to watch hockey? Or when you were a little guy, what were you dreaming about?
I was dreaming about broadcasting, but I wasn't sure that it was going to be this. I didn't really. I knew what hockey was. Like, we would play boot hockey when I was a kid. We played boot hockey a lot. There was a rink right by my house in Superior, Wisconsin, and with some friends, we'd go down there with sticks and we'd just screw around and play. But I didn't know how to skate. We just played boot hockey. I didn't really know anything about the game, and so I got to about 11, 12 years old, and Wisconsin Superior, the Division III college about a mile from my house growing up, they had some pretty good teams. In fact, they won a national championship in 2002, but they were in multiple Frozen Fours in the 1990s. In my formative teenage years, I spent a lot of time in their building watching their games, and that's what really got me into hockey. And then I started dating my now wife in 1998, and she was a huge hockey fan, watched it all the time. Our second date, actually, was the 1998 Gophers Bulldogs WCHA playoff the third game of the series at the Deck, where UMD came back from 4 down in the third period to force overtime and won it in overtime 5-4 to move on to the final 5. And that was about the moment that I got hooked. That was really it for me. And that's what really got me into the sport. So I was at that time working part-time for the radio station that carries Bulldog Hockey now, KDAL, and they had Kerry Raudas doing games for them. I think he had 17 years, and I shout out to Kerry because I learned a lot about how to call hockey from Kerry. I actually board opped a bunch of their games. When Scott got the job into the 03-04 season, they got to the Frozen Four. I was the board op for a lot of their games that year, and just listening to how Kerry carried himself in the booth, how he called games, I picked up a lot of pointers. I started calling high school hockey games. Got to cover Superior at the Wisconsin State Tournament a couple of times down at the old Dane County Coliseum in Madison, which was just a hoot to be. That old building, which is still standing, by the way, was just so much fun to be in, and the history, the character in that place. And then Kerry had a dispute with management just after the 05-06 season started. UMD had lost both ends of an opening weekend series, I think, to Bemidji State. And that Tuesday, Kerry called me at home, and he said, I just resigned. I was like, holy crap. I didn't think anything else of it. I thought, my goodness, idiot that I was at 28 years old, like, who's going to call the games now? And so I get called into a meeting the next day, and they're like, do you want to call the games? I was doing UMD football at the time and was going to do basketball that winter. And I'm like, at this point, Kevin, I am not kidding you when I say I had called fewer than 100 hockey games in my life when I got put in this meeting in October of 2005. And they're like, we want you to call games. I'm like, and basically, we don't have another option. It's you, it's you, or we don't know what we're going to do. So I took the job, and a couple weekends later, they played at Michigan Tech, and I called my first UMD game and spent most of the season having absolutely no idea what I was doing. But, boy, it didn't take long to grow on me, man. There's been some stops and starts along the way, but this is my 20th season in the booth, and I cannot think of doing anything else at this point. This is great.
Well, it's a hard one to pick up on the fly. I've worked in broadcasting, studied broadcasting for decades. I've done horse racing, I've done football, I've done baseball, done soccer, done hockey. And when I've done play-by-play for hockey, and it's been few and far between, very infrequent, it freaks me out. It moves at such a fast pace. And I think what the average person doesn't understand, when they watch on TV, it all comes out just beautiful and it's flowing freely. When you're in that spot, whether it's radio or TV, and you're calling a game, you're focused on the puck because that's the natural instinct when you watch hockey is to follow the puck. But if you're going to be a play-by-play person, you have to know the other players on the ice and what they're doing and who's going to be the outlet pass. And it all happens in a blink of an eye. And, oh, by the way, there are 4 line changes that happen, and there are interchangeable pieces. It isn't like baseball where the 9 guys are in their spot the entire time, or in football when basically it's the same lineup every time, just different forms of the play. Hockey is so fast-paced. I don't know how you pick it up on the go like that. That had to be a challenge.
It was chaotic. And keep in mind that the way we do things, I have an analyst, Craig Karakis, who played at UMD for Mike Sertich, the late great Mike Sertich, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And so he's only with me, though, for home games. I'm on the road. I'm by myself. And so my first games were on the road. I think 4 of my first 6 or 6 of my first 8 games when I finally got the job were on the road. But what it taught me was you've got to figure it out quickly. You know, what needs to be relayed during a play and what doesn't, because there's a certain amount of self-editing you have to be able to do, and that's before you've tried to integrate an analyst, before you've tried to reset time and score, because you have to do that on the radio. They don't have the Fox box on their TV to tell them how much time's left in the game and what the score is. You've got to tell them yourself. So all these things that you have to do. And so there is a certain amount of self-editing. You have to be able to paint the picture for people, which means you're identifying which zone the puck's in. My rule is if the puck crosses a line, a blue line, it has to be mentioned what line it crossed. Is UMD on the defensive side? Are they defending? Are they carrying the puck through? But it's got to be, you got to identify where that thing is. Otherwise, all you're doing is calling who has the puck, and people have to figure that out for themselves, and that's not really feasible for a listener. So you have to paint enough of the picture that they can understand what you're seeing, because you are their eyes, and you have to do all these other things at the same time. But once you get into it, we all develop a certain cadence and a way of doing things, and it almost becomes second nature. And like, I've called other things. I've done baseball, I've done football, I've done basketball, and going back and doing those now is so weird because I'm used to this chaos. And those sports, all their chaos is different. And even like football, I think the last game I did was a football game, and you've got all that time between the play, but you have to make sure you reset what just happened, where the ball is, down and distance and all that. It can get a little chaotic if you're trying to give too much information when you're calling a football game. And then baseball, you've got time you got to fill, because you're looking, even with a pitch clock, you're still looking at 15, 30 seconds between pitches. And you can't just sit there and not say anything. So they all have their challenges. Hockey's is just it's the chaos of it that makes it's a challenge, but it's fun at the same time.
I hope there are young aspiring broadcasters that come to this podcast and can hear some of this stuff. And this question would really line up for some of those young boys or girls that listen to Wooden Sticks. And I work with 2 of the best. I think Joe O'Donnell does an unbelievable job on a radio side with the Wild, and
fantastic.
Obviously my affection for Anthony LaPanta. I've worked with him for 3 decades. I know the work that he puts in and how good he is at his craft. They're both phenomenal. They're both super into the numbers and the details of the job, but they do it different ways, Bruce. Anthony has line charts where the forward lines are organized 1 through 4, then the 3 sets of D, then the goalies, and he builds these for every game. He has since the early 90s when we worked high school hockey games together. When I watch Joe O'Donnell put his cards together, he does it just in numerical order. And so he has the same information. He has each player with their own little box of information, but he goes from lowest to highest and calls the game that way. Which way do you do it? Do you have the lines organized, or do you go by numeric order?
I used to do my own chart, and then I realized I don't need to do my own chart. So what I do is I get the line charts from the SID, wherever we are, and so those are laid out by line. And it's easy for me with UMD because I'm around here all the time. And like Scott Sandlin is always really good about, if there's a certain guy that he's not necessarily thrilled with, he's going to say, we might make this change. Like we talked about on Saturday, we were chatting before the game against Alaska, and he said, this guy might go here, just be aware of that. And sure enough, late in the game, that guy went there, and I knew that was going to happen, a possibility. So in my mind, I'm ready for it. But besides that, I want to see the lines. I want to know who's with who, especially for a team that I'm unfamiliar with, like Alaska last weekend, because it allows me to quickly become familiar with who's going to be on the ice with who. And for me, that's what's always worked.
Yeah, I'm the same way. When I've filled in, and I've probably done maybe a couple of dozen games in my life, I like to have the line charts with who they're going to be out there with. And if there's an injury during the game, I adjust, and that's fine. But more often than not, as you know, these coaches put those lines together for a reason. They're going to play a lot of hockey together. And then I can figure out, okay, yeah, 13's the trailer here on this 3-on-2. I got to keep an eye on where he's going. It happens in the blink of an eye, but it does give you a little bit of an edge. I'm really happy you brought up the name Mike Surdich in the last couple of minutes, because I was lucky enough to get to know him over the years and had such an affection for the way he did things. And I know we lost him in 2024. And as we turn the calendar to a new year, it is nice to reflect on some of the legends of the game. How much interaction did you have with Coach Surdich over the years? And what's the ripple effect been like for him with that hockey program? Because I know, watching what he built in the nearly 20 years he was up there as their coach, starting in the 80s and working up to about 2000, that this guy had a huge impact on the game of hockey.
So I've had a radio show up here for, oh my goodness, off and on, mostly on for more than 25 years. So I go way back with Surt, because I would have Surt on my radio show just to chat, just to talk. Not necessarily to talk about hockey, just about other things happening in sports or just life, fishing, outdoors, because he loved the outdoors. And we actually had, so Mike got let go from UMD in 2000, and Scott took over. Scott, we had a Saturday morning show. Chris Long from KSTP down in the cities, and I had a Saturday show up here at the time, and we were the first local outlet to interview Scott Sandelin after he got the UMD job, because we talked to him the very next day, right away in the morning. And so Mike was bored, and Mike actually took a job with us at the radio station. He did a midday show, and it was always wonderful to talk to him and see him. And so in 2000, right, a random Monday in November, after a tough start to the year and a bad year the year before, Michigan Tech let Timmy Waters go as their head coach, and they hired Mike Surdich as the interim. Mike took the job, and the next morning came into the radio station, and they're talking about Michigan Tech just fired Tim Waters. Who do you think is going to take the job? And Mike's like, I'm going to take it. And the co-host was like, he thought he was kind of funning with him at the time. He's like, no, I actually took the job. I'm heading out there today. This is my last day. This is the last day on the radio. He went out to Michigan Tech, and he, the Michigan Tech we've seen since then, Mel Pearson and now Joe Shawn out there, Mike Surdich really stabilized that program. They were in a really tough bind at that point. They weren't getting great players, and Mike, he instilled a certain style in that team, and they never had a great year with Mike, but they were at least much more competitive. They were like 4-36 the year before Mike came on, and he got them to where they were competitive year in and year out, and then they began to build from there. But just a special human being. It was always fun to interact with and talk about things that weren't necessarily hockey with, but a guy that, I know Scott Sandelin thought very highly of, and Mike, Mike was not happy with the way things went down here when he left, but Mike was never publicly bitter towards UMD, and he always treated Scott Sandelin like gold, and I know that's something Scott always valued.
I'll tell you a quick story. So I was, at this time, it's probably the early to mid 1990s. So I was a boys high school hockey coach at both Burnsville and Moundsview in that time frame, and I was, I believe, coaching at Moundsview when I've heard
stories about your coaching career, Kevin.
We're not going to go down that road right now, but I'm at Aldrich Arena, and it's a quadruple header in section playoff hockey, and I'm sitting there, and the place is packed, and it just so happens that by game 2, I end up sitting right next to Mike Surdich, and I introduced myself. I was a huge fan of his. I thought this guy was such a personality and so charismatic, and watching college hockey growing up in the 80s, this was a guy I wanted to get to know. And so we ended up watching the last 3 games of this quadruple header at Aldrich Arena together. And at some point during the evening doubleheader, he pulled out this basketball handbook, and he knew I was a young coach, kind of taking my lumps at the time. And he's like, I want to show you something. Do you have time? And so it was intermission. I'm like, I got nothing but time. This is Mike Surdich. Whatever you want to do, let's do this. And so he pulls out this basketball handbook, and he starts explaining the defensive zone coverage in hockey and how it compares to some of the defenses that top college programs had used, including one with Coach Wooden at UCLA. And by the time I got done, I was mesmerized by this guy and the passion he had and the knowledge he had, and so outside the box. And it was awesome. It was one of those magical nights when you just go to the rink thinking you're going to be watching hockey. I was by myself, kind of scouting at the time. And he just changed the complexion of my whatever that. I think it was a Saturday afternoon at Aldrich Arena. And I'll never forget it because I was a nobody. I'm just sitting there watching hockey. He knew I was a young coach and nothing more. And he took the time to not only show me that handbook and talk hockey, but we sat in there and talked life. And I had such an appreciation for him and bumped into him over the years after that. And I always thanked him for being so kind. And that just, to me, of everything I've heard about him, Bruce, is kind of the essence of Mike Surdich. And when you kind of relayed these stories here today, it reminded me of what a kind soul he was.
The other thing, too, I'll relay this. The day Herb Brooks died, I was on the air that night, and we had just gotten the word when I went on the air, or about to go on the air, that Herb had been involved in that accident and had passed away on his way back down to the cities. And the first person I thought to call, there were two people I thought about. It was John Gilbert, he was at the Star Tribune for all those years and wrote a book about Herb Brooks. And I know John's had some health issues up here, and wish him nothing but the best. We see him all the time. He still gets around and is at our media conferences and a bunch of UMD games during the season. But the other one was Mike Surdich, and I called Mike that night, and I said, this is what's happened. And I actually broke the news to him that Herb had passed away. He had not heard it yet. But I said, can you join me at some point tonight? I've got a 4-hour radio show and talk about Herb. And he was on me for like an hour. And I wish, to this day, that's the one recording I think that I don't have that I wish I had. I've got a lot of audio stored away, but that's the one that I didn't get that I kind of wish now that I had, because it was great radio, talking about Herb Brooks and his impact on the sport and coaching against him and all these different things that came up in conversation with Mike over the course of it was like 45 minutes of radio content.
Oh, so cool. I mean, yeah, that's the stuff you dream about when you get into this business. And the other thing you always think about, and it's the essence of the job, is we're all living vicariously through the teams that we cover. There's ups, there's downs, there's great seasons, there's bad seasons. I'm going to tell you, last year with the Wild felt like 2 seasons crammed into one. It was a death march all the way through. It was great to go to Sweden. It's still an awesome gig, but this year has been completely different. It's just been so much fun. You've had a chance to cover national championships, and I got to ask you, because this has never happened in my 19 years covering the Wild. We haven't got there. I think we'll get there. In fact, if I had to bet, I'd say it happened in the next 4 or 5 years. I really think this team's going to make a cup run. But I have to ask you, as a broadcaster, what is it like to ride that roller coaster all the way to the finish line and see your team come out on top?
It's beyond words, man. I remember 2011. So the media always gets invited down to Amsoil and the Players Lounge, and we get to watch the selection show. So we're in the room as they pick the teams and they lay out the bracket, and we get put in a regional with Yale and Union out of the ECAC. Yale was the host. They were the number 1 overall seed. They were the best team start to finish basically in the season according to the pairwise. And they were getting to play a regional in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which is like 20 miles, if that, from New Haven in the Yale campus. And so all the talk is Yale's got the number 1 power play in the country. Union's got the number 2 power play in the country. Nate Lehman who's now at Providence, was the coach at Union at the time. And they had a really good team as well. And we were like, I think, 6th or 7th in the country in power play percentage. And they didn't say that when Ben didn't mention it once. They talked about Yale and Union and barely mentioned Duluth. And it was a rallying cry for that group, that team. They took that personally. The Michael Jordan gif, and I took that personally. But they did. They took that personally. And they went in there. Union had like 7 or 8 power plays in the regional semifinal. And UMD killed every one of them. Kenny Ryder shut out to Union 2-0. We scored both our goals on the power play. Then come out against Yale the next night, and Mike Connolly scores a shorthanded goal in the first period. They get 2 power play goals in the second. They beat Union into powder, or Yale into powder, in their own regional to go to the Frozen Four. But I remember thinking, this is really cool, but I didn't really have a chance to soak all that in because I was so wrapped up in what I was doing work-wise. And I kept telling myself it was great. I'll never look back on it negatively. But I remember then we got to Chicago for the Frozen Four in 2017, and the 10 days, whatever it was, from the end of the regional in Fargo to the trip to Chicago, I kept telling myself, you're going to enjoy this. You're going to enjoy this. You're going to be able to take a step back at some point and enjoy this. And I made sure I did, and it just made it all the more special. They didn't win that one. They won the next two. But it to be a part of that, to see a team that comes together the way you have to come together, because unlike in the NHL, it's one-game outs in college hockey when you get to the NCAAs. It's a single elimination tournament, for better or for worse. And to see a team come together the way that you have to come together to win on that stage at that level is beyond special.
That's what it's all about. And I love that. I love the one and done. I love the emotion that's involved. It reminds me of section playoff hockey on the high school side, which for me is as good as it gets in terms of being a spectator and being involved at a building. So that leads us to the final segment here, Bruce. We call it the Hat Trick Hot Seat. I've got 3 quick questions for you. We're going to learn a little bit more about you away from the microphone. We're going to start with this. You can't say UMD, and you've got 2 great venues up there in Amsoil and the Deck. But your favorite college hockey venue to watch a game when you're on the road?
The easiest answer is Ralph Engelstad Arena, right?
Yes, probably.
And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you that the answer is Ralph Engelstad Arena. But I almost feel like we're grading on a curve. If you compare everything to Ralph Engelstad Arena, nothing is ever going to measure, right? Because it's that nice. It's unbelievable. So I'm going to give you a couple of different options. I really enjoy calling games in Mankato. It's not a true press box, but they've done some nice work there to give us an area that we can work in. It's a great sight line. It's a wonderful building to be in. When you pack that place, as they have been doing now more often than not in Mankato, it is so much fun to be in there to call a game. And the other one, I mentioned it earlier, what Colorado College has done with their new building, Ed Robeson Arena, it is night and day compared to the old Broadmoor World Arena, which I know you've been in at some point in your career. Yeah, it was fine for what it was. But they have a modern building on campus now. They pack it every night. It's a great atmosphere. It's only about 3,000 seats. The press box is tight, but it's right on top of the ice. It's a great sight line, a great venue to work from, and we've yet to have a game in there that wasn't a wonderful atmosphere.
That's really cool. It's a great tout for fans to get out there. It's a beautiful part of the country, and obviously it's some great hockey playing in the NCHC. Okay. We got a lot of listeners that are going to come up and watch the Bulldogs play, or they're going to bring their kids up for a youth hockey tournament. I would like to hear, whether it's 1 or 2, your favorite Duluth restaurants to recommend for fans when they come to Duluth.
Sammy's Pizza. I mean, if you come to Duluth and you don't go to Sammy's Pizza, you have done it wrong. And if you, that's just the way it is. And I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit. There's a place up by the airport. It's actually in Hermantown. It's called Mackenzie's. They serve unbelievable burgers. If you like burgers, you can build your own, and everything is good at Mackenzie's. So next time you're in Duluth, head up to by the airport. It's in Hermantown Square, and stop by Mackenzie's and tell them that I sent you. They'll say, "Who the heck is that guy?" They probably will.
Great
I
don't
think I know anybody that works there, but I enjoy, every time I go there, I enjoy the food.
All right. Now, final question, and you have a night off, and you've committed to, with your wife, sitting at home and watching one hockey movie. Now, there are a lot of picks here, a lot of picks. There's a lot of different directions you can go, but if you can only watch one, what hockey movie on date night are you going to watch? Because I think that aspect might change your answer. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know your wife, but I'm very curious to see what you're going to pick.
Dude, she's been married to me for 25 years now. So I can pretty much say anything I want. Boy, it's tough because there's so many. But the first one I thought of when you said that was Mystery Alaska.
Yeah, I love that movie so much.
I love Mystery Alaska. There's some, I'm a guy that doesn't think the Winter Classic is a dead event for the NHL. I believe in the charm of outdoor games. even though I've said I don't care if I ever call one again, because they're so different. To the sight lines and things you get sometimes at outdoor games can be a little rough, but the atmosphere, the vibe that you get in an outdoor game is something that everyone should get to experience. So there's that part of it, the pond hockey part of it, and this is something I've always thought, the quirky fun of the story of Mystery Alaska, and they're going to drag an NHL team to random remote Alaska to play a pond hockey game. It's so preposterous that it's enjoyable.
And I'm going to say this, and this is going to tie back into what we both do for a living, and I mean this as a movie fan. Sports movies that incorporate real broadcasting voices. I think of Kevin Costner in For the Love of the Game, and you get treated to Vin Scully at Yankee Stadium. I think of Miracle and how they wove Al Michaels' call literally into that movie. And the late, great Doug McLeod, one of my all-time
Thank you for mentioning this.
Yes, because I adored that man. And he is so damn good in that movie. I think that is a big piece of what makes Mystery Alaska work at a very high level. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. And getting to hear Doug McLeod in that movie was a difference maker for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's a great point that you bring up. I'm glad you did, because Doug was another all-timer for me.
Oh, and think of the broadcasting history of Doug McLeod going back to all the way back to North Stars and their first, big Stanley Cup run of the 90s with Mike Modano and that team, and then all the way through to working Gopher hockey as recent as just a few years ago. State tournaments, college, high school, pro, like in this market, one of the legends of play-by-play, and he brought an excitement level to a game that not many could bring. And then some of those great sayings, the Saturday Night Sizzler, northbound train, southbound track, the metallurgy save. Bruce, for guys like us that not only work in the game but just love the game, he made it better.
He absolutely did, and some of the quirkiness. Yeah, I think back, and one of the other things I got taught very quickly when I got into this business was you got to remember you're doing a show for these people. This isn't necessarily supposed to be serious. And yes, you have serious moments that will happen here and there, and you have to be able to rise to those moments. But for the most part, we're supposed to be trying to entertain people as much as we're trying to inform anybody. And, as my boss likes to say, we're not curing cancer. And thank heavens for that, because I'd be in trouble if we were trying to do that. We're just trying to put a show on for people. And Doug was quintessential in that regard, and a great influence for a lot of people in terms of how to do this and how to make it not necessarily so serious.
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to close our conversation. And you've got that gift. Like, I've known you for years. You've got a beautiful voice, but you've got the passion, you've got the energy, the entertainment value. You make the game better. And so thank you for being a part of Wooden Sticks today. And I can't wait to see where you and the Bulldogs go, not only this year, but in the years to come.
I appreciate you always, man. You're one of the good ones, and I look forward to a lot of wonderful interviews with a shirtless Jake Middleton down the stretch of the regular season.
I promise they're coming. As much as we can bang on that door, we're going to do it. That is Bruce Ciskie, Duluth legend, college hockey guru. I'm back after a quick break here to put a close on another edition of the show here on the Talk North Podcast Network. All right, we're back to close the show, and man, I love Bruce's voice. Those sweet, dulcet sounds. He was meant for what he has found for a profession. He has got an awesome, awesome voice, and what a run it's been. Watching that program at UMD, year in, year out, they are a factor. Even on a year like this, where they're really struggling and their record isn't pretty, I wouldn't sleep on them, especially when you get to playoff time with that coach and that young talent pool that he's assembled. And as Bruce adroitly pointed out, some of the different wrinkles on that roster, they're a team I wouldn't want to play come NCHA tournament time. And I'll be very curious to see if and when they pull off a few upsets and try to make a run into the NCAA tournament. As I look at the pairwise rankings, I referenced those a couple of times during our conversation. Boston College right now currently number 1, Michigan State number 2, Providence 3, Minnesota 4. Those likely right now, as we sit here, would be your top 4 seeds in the NCAA tournament. Boston College, Michigan State, Providence, and Minnesota. But lurking just in behind are those Denver Pioneers. Yeah, Zeev Boyum and that bunch, the defending champs, certainly I think are going to get every chance to make a run in the pairwise, playing in that conference. They are 15-5-0. And then just behind them, the Maine Black Bears and the aforementioned Western Michigan Broncos that Bruce alluded to. So really some top talent in college hockey. And then you look at some of the teams just behind them. St. Cloud State's in a great spot. Ohio State, Michigan out of the Big Ten. They're all top 12 in the pairwise. BU, Minnesota State, Dan Meyer's favorite team. Well, if you want to really dive into Maverick hockey, watch him on a Friday or Saturday in his Twitter feed. Woofda. There's a lot of stuff there. Oh boy. But no, it's great passion, and that team looks like they are going to be a real factor here. Arizona State in the final spot for that NCAA tournament right now before we do the conference tournament thing later in the second half of the year. Forks up right now for the Sun Devils, who are 10-7-1, and the aforementioned UMD Bulldogs in a very unfamiliar place in the pairwise, 40th right now for the Bulldogs at 6-11-1. But as I mentioned, I think they're going to have a good second half. Bruce talked about some of the reasons they might do that. And then I think come playoff time with Sandelin and some of the intangibles that they can bring to the table, they could be a tough out. So keep an eye on that college hockey as we get into a real fun part of the season. If you're a fan of the game on Frozen Pond, high school hockey is now into the second half of the year, just like college hockey. And we just had a fabulous guest that you can go back and listen to from last week. And Sean Goldsworthy, the head coach at Minnetonka, had some really fun conversations on that show about state tournaments, section finals, and all kinds of good stuff there for you to chew on. So if you're a hockey fan like I am, this is a really good time of year in February to every night dive into something different. You can head to your local rink to watch the high school game. You can turn on the TV and watch the Wild or college hockey. You'll get paid one way or the other, and it sure is fun right now to be a fan of the game. Looking forward to some more great hockey conversations on the show. You can ping me on my X account, which used to be Twitter. I'm at Gorgamatic21. If you have any recommendations for guests that you'd want to hear from on the show, it can be a player, it can be a coach, it can be a broadcaster. Most of them are going to be after their careers as far as playing goes. So we don't have a lot of current players on. That's what we call it Wooden Sticks. We try to go back to where it all began. But send me some recommendations to my Twitter account. I'd love to hear what you think. And I really appreciate that you spend time every week diving in here to the show. Another episode in the books. We'll be back next week here on Wooden Sticks. Have a good one.